This last session is all about a tool that a lot of people are using, and that one is living only in the Apple ecosystem. However, it's one of the best presentation platforms and presentation tools on the market, and we don't have any other option but to bring you the best person to talk about that tool. Nicte, who is so many things, so many things, a designer and so many things, but she also has an incredible, and probably she will mention it, an incredible LinkedIn course, LinkedIn learning course on the topic, will be your instructor for the next 45 minutes, and she will bring you behind the scenes of what's possible in Apple Keynote, which is not that possible in any other platform, so that all of you know what this tool is capable of. Nicte, welcome to the conference. We're doing this. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and really bring you this new perspective on how you can use Keynote to elevate your brand story. So today, now more than ever, how we present, especially because we're no longer in actual places where we're kind of staying at home and doing our virtual presentations, how we present is part of an experience that we create. And when we show up with too much information, it's distracting and creates confusion. I'm sure many of you guys have seen presentations where there's so much wonderful knowledge being shared, but there's too much information on the screen. And what happens is that you end up with some weird visual mishmash of confusion because there's too much going on. And you end up not paying attention to the person speaking and trying to figure out what it is that you see on their slide deck. So this is why it's so important for us to really be aware of this one thing, that it literally takes far less than 2 seconds to form that first impression. So if I showed up like this to the presentation, I guarantee that you either would completely dismiss me as someone that you can trust, or you may have a little bit of curiosity why this person's showing up so crazy looking at this presentation. But the trust factor and the association that you would have towards my brand would really be impacted. And while we don't show up like this to a presentation, sometimes our slide decks do. We put so much information, so many visuals, so many different font sizes and everything. And part of it is because if we're not professional presentation designers, or we try to do this ourselves, we get overwhelmed and we feel like we need to put all of the information in there to help our audience, but that doesn't help. So let me bring you back in. I'm Nicte Cuevas. I'm a brand strategist and graphic designer. I work with global brands, small businesses, and a lot of the things that we really focus on with my company is really using empathy-driven methods to really connect with the audience and help drive their brand story. So we use color psychology and intentional visual messaging to really help bring those messaging tools together. And Apple Keynote is going to be one of them. So today, we're going to focus on these areas. And the first one is, I'm going to talk about when you want to use Keynote. So we're going to talk about the possibilities, what you can do, and what can gear you to choosing Keynote over the other presentation platforms that you could use. We're going to talk about the power of themes and branded templates and how wonderful this can be, especially for productivity's sake. We're going to talk about interactive animations, which is my personal favorite one. And I'm going to give you an overview of what you can do and some of the best practices when it comes to using Apple Keynote. But before we get really into Keynote, I want to drive this message because no matter what platform we use, we need to be really clear about the message that we're here to give or what we want for people to experience with our presentation. So your visual content needs to support your storytelling. It's not supposed to be the narrative. So what I was saying, remember earlier, where I was saying we have so much content, we're trying to make our slides tell the story, but it should support our narrative. And so we want to make sure that we keep this in mind, that there's no denying that we first connect with visuals. When it comes to like language, we associate shapes first, then color, then we go into reading text. So it's something very important to keep in mind how we put these together to tell our story. When we use the wrong elements, it really can harm your brand perception. And these are just images that I'm using as an example, but it goes with fonts, having too many different fonts that are just confusing, that shift your brand personality. And so here you can see a variety of mishmash images where they look cheesy, some of it's really dark and really depressing. And so when you talk about the emotion that has for your audience as you're presenting something, that can really shift their perception. That can also shift their attention span because they're not feeling excited, right? So too much randomness that doesn't connect with your brand story will affect the way that you present, no matter what platform you use. But if we take things and we shift it a little and we have more clarity, the right types of visuals can help you create positive emotions. Now, this depends on your brand and what you're trying to do, but really bringing that together. So using images where people are not overly posed or doing like those really like posed images where it's like they're clearly looking at a camera. And when we think about how we live our day-to-day lives, we don't go around doing, these poses or like staring at people. So these types of images where people are in a thought process or you're kind of looking bird's eye overview, it makes you feel more part of the brand story. It helps you feel and tell a better story for your audience. So people feel that they're a little bit more in that moment and a part of what you are sharing. So this is really important as you are working with your slide decks and creating all your visual communication. This is really important to keep this in mind. How you put these tools together, how you put these visuals together to help tell your story. Color is such a powerful, powerful tool for brands. And I guarantee you that many of you, within like those split seconds of me going into the slide, were able to immediately tell what these brands were, despite the fact that the color was intentionally shifted. I did this on purpose because I want to show you that when we are consistent with our brand, especially with color, we can make these quick associations. So you know that the first one is Starbucks, Twitter, and then the next one is Hallmark, right? No, I'm just kidding. I know it's Target. But we already knew this within split seconds. So this is why I really want to kind of drive that idea of how we can use visuals or communication, especially color, to really drive this consistency. And that really can help you with your presentations. How you can use color strategically to build that brand recognition, especially if you're starting off and you're really wanting to drive that awareness in the market, people will start to recognize you through the brand colors that you use. Many brands fail to leverage the emotional triggers connected to their colors. So we often just focus on how we can create color harmony with our designs, how we can make sure that everything's kind of in sync and this balanced approach. But we often forget, how is this color going to connect with our brand story? How is this going to make our audience feel? And how can we use this to create a positive emotion? So you can use color strategically in your visual communications, especially in your slide decks, to convey a certain message. You can use it for call to action. So some areas that you want to pull more focus on, you can use that to help tell your story without necessarily telling people, here, look at this section in my slide, or look at this other section. So that'll really, really, really help you tell a better story through color. I could talk about this all day, but this is not our focus for this presentation. We are here to talk about Apple Keynote. So if you're wondering when you should use Apple Keynote, it depends on several factors. So I'm going to go over what you can consider when you're wanting to use Apple Keynote. So when you want to use Apple Keynote, I really love that Keynote empowers you across the board. One of my first and favorite things about Keynote is the user experience and the user interface. It's really, really easy to work with. It's not overwhelming. And if you are just trying to do this on your own without hiring someone, this can be a really great starting point for you. And here I'm giving you a preview of what this interface could look like. So on the far left is where you would see your slides. So once you've created your slides, or even if you're working on the master slides, you would see that on the far left area. So you can kind of see all my slides there. And it makes it really easy to see. And right above that, you see a view, zoom, and add slides. So that's where you'd be able to change the view mode for your slides. You can zoom in, so you'd be able to see more or less of your actual slide deck that you're editing. You can add your slides from your master slides, and we'll go a little bit more into this in just a few minutes. At the very top, this is what I love, that is super clean interface, and it makes it really easy to follow through. At that very top, you'll see table, chart, text, shape, media, and comments. And you also see a collaboration tool. These are all super straightforward. So if you're just wanting to really focus on your presentation, which is the goal, right? We want to be able to just have our presentation there and use that to deliver. This will help you stay focused. What I've encountered is a lot of my clients who are small business owners, they feel this struggle. They enter this paralysis analysis because they're not designers, but they feel they have to have this powerful slide deck to really tell their brand story. And what happens is that they've used other platforms, but there's so many great options for them. However, they just don't know how to navigate the software that they end up stuck. And they end up spending far more trying to design their own presentation than really focusing on the delivery of the presentation, which is just as important, if not more important. So Keynote really helps you if you're really overwhelmed, you're not too sure how to use. This is why I love Keynote, because it's a powerful presentation software that you can use, but makes it easy for you to follow. And on the very far right, this is where the magic happens. This is where you're able to see how you can edit your slides. You can add your animations. This is where you can modify your text, where you can define where your headlines are, what your headline fonts are going to be. Every single element, this side panel on your right is where the magic happens. You're able to modify your documents and all these wonderful animations that you can do. It's a really, really clean interface. I really love that it just makes it so easy for you to know where to go. Now, another reason why you may want to use Keynote is that it has capabilities of cross-device editing. So one of the great features about being able to work off Mac or the iOS platforms is you really can just share your presentation across the board. So if you're a busy business owner, or you're on the go a lot, or if you're a parent like myself and you have to be on the go sometimes and do work, don't always have to have your laptop near you. You can just work on your presentations through your iPhone or your iPad, any iOS device. So that is super powerful because it just makes it more versatile. If you are going to share your presentation across the board, I do recommend that you have your fonts saved onto that device because the fonts won't transfer over. So that is one thing that I do recommend when using Keynote. Third factor you may want to consider is cost. This can be a big determining factor for many people, especially if they are trying to do this themselves, if they haven't hired someone quite yet. Cost is a big determining factor. With Apple, you get that for free. So if you have your Apple device or Apple, computer, this is included for free, which is great. What I love about Keynote is that with Apple, they constantly are updating Keynote. So you'll see new features that they're constantly adding. You don't have to worry about subscriptions. You don't have to worry about purchasing new software every so often to get the latest and greatest. They're delivering that automatically, frequently, actually, which I really like. So they're constantly making sure that they're elevating this presentation software to help people. What are other benefits of possibly using Keynote? So one of my favorite one is built-in themes. Built-in themes we'll go over in just a second is really powerful because if you're not sure where to start, they provide essentially a blank canvas of options of themes that you can use that are ready made with beautiful design, structure, and everything. All you have to do is plug and play. So you have also the power of branded templates. Branded templates I love branded templates because it not only allows you to focus on your presentation and really create that brand story and that consistency that I've been constantly speaking about, it's really easy to access your branded templates inside Keynote, which really makes your productivity so much faster. And the last one is easy to use animations. So there's so many presentation softwares out there, but I feel Keynote delivers the easiest way to create really great animations that aren't over the top fireworks too much visually that will actually cause a distraction. So when done right, you can really leverage these animations to help tell better stories, to keep your audience engaged, and these are the things that we are going to go over with Keynote. So when it comes to themes and branded templates, there's two ways, as I mentioned, that we can start. We can start with the free built-in themes. And what I call this part of building your slide deck is a plan with organized creativity. So sometimes we hear creatives say that they have so many ideas, idea here, idea there, let's add this, let's add that. Remember how I was saying sometimes we put too much in our presentations and we cause this confusion or distraction. What I love about these built-in themes is that they are built with a design mind in these presentations. So you already have structure embedded there. So you don't really have to worry about creating these presentations. So how would that look like? When you open Keynote and you do file new presentation, or sometimes it automatically has this window pop up, you'll be able to choose from the theme. So these are all the themes that they have currently, and you can see that they are just divided into different sections. You can have a minimal style, a bold style, it can feel a little editorial. So it gives you so many options. And with these, you can still go ahead and modify this, make this to your own brand. So the possibilities are endless. And they're constantly actually adding new themes, all part of, just free cost. With you have your Apple, this is super helpful because there's going to be new possibilities. If you're still trying to figure out how to do the presentation, this is a really great guidance to get your feet into Keynote and using these for your presentations. So when it comes now to branded templates, this is where I feel there's so much power in your branded templates. With branded templates, you're allowed to really just tell your visual story consistently. So let me give you a little preview of how that would look like. When you've gone through the process of creating your slides, and one of the things that you can do is you can start from one of the free themes that you can have, or 3 free templates inside Apple Keynote. The very first one, you can start with the basic version and add your own text, create the fonts that you want to use. So make sure you're using the fonts that you need. You can add your colors, all these elements. And once you've defined that all, you can then take this and say, hey, I need to use this for another presentation. I need this to be my core branded template that I use for X presentation. Then all you would need to do is go to the top. You can't see file, but you go to file and then you go click on save theme. Then you'll see a window pop up that allows you to name the theme, and then you can name it. Next time you launch Apple Keynote and you try to create a new presentation in that theme, in that initial theme window that I shared just a minute ago, you'll actually see your own branded Keynote themes inside that window. So you don't have to go and say, oh, where was that presentation that I did for X client? Oh, let me go back and use that duplicated to create the new presentation for this new client, so on and so forth. You're going to save so much time by just having your own branded templates. What I highly recommend is, it doesn't matter if you use Keynote or not, but if you use Keynote, what I love about Keynote is that you have a capability to create several themes. So if your company runs a variety of presentations, have an idea of what type of slide decks you would need and create specific slide decks for that. For instance, let's say you're trying to do a product launch and you want to be able to share this internally. You can have a branded theme inside Keynote that is specific to product launches. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel. And again, this creates this consistency. If you're trying to do a client proposal, you can also have a branded Keynote theme that helps you tell your story or helps guide your client through that proposal. So you're, again, not having to use this presentation to try to modify it to that. If you can start from the beginning, once you had a good idea of what intent you need these slide decks to serve and how they can help you tell your brand story, create specific templates for those. I guarantee you, not only is it going to make your life easier, it's going to give you that clarity and it's that organized creativity that will allow you to tell your story. And what's going to happen is that because you have a structure in place, you're going to spend less time trying to design these slide decks every single time and really focus more on how you can plug in your content, your story, and what you need to do for your presentation inside your slide deck. So your slide decks don't become the show, they just support your presentation. And that's how having these themes will really help you inside Keynote. So with branded templates, you can already see that there's so many great possibilities. Now, what I love about using Keynote, and I know other platforms do use this, but it's the slide deck collaboration. You're able to share your slide deck with other people. So let's say you have a copywriter and you need them to do a pass on your slide deck before you use it. There's a great way for you to share this and collaborate, have them make the edits or just have them view your presentation. So if we're inside Keynote, in the very top beautiful clean bar, you can see an area that says collaborate. That's all you would do is click on that. You'll need to make sure that you upload your presentation to the iCloud so that they can have access to that. And with their email, their iCloud email, they'll be able to look at the information, make notes, collaborate. If you want them to if it's your copy editor or someone on your marketing team and you need them to be able to make those changes easily, you can give them that access. And once you're done sharing that, you can also revoke that access or remove it really easily so that nothing gets changed last minute. This is super powerful. And one of the things that I also love about Keynote is that not just this collaboration feature, but you can even use, if you're going to present, you can use your iPhone as a quote unquote clicker. If you need to have a little reference, you're able to see your slides. So it's a great remote to use for your slide. If you prefer to stand up and give the presentations, now that we're not in this big screen area where we're doing these presentations in person, this really helps you create that better experience across the board. So you're really using our tools today to help amplify our storytelling capabilities. And this brings me to my favorite part is the interactive animations with Keynote. So there's so many things that we could do with Keynote, and this is where I want to spend a little more time giving you some insight as to what you can do, but we don't have enough time to cover everything. So I want to focus on 3 key animations that you could do with Keynote. So there's various options. The first one is object and type animations, and these can be very simple animations. You've probably seen that I do not use bullet points in my presentations. So you see these, like anytime I have some point, it's the subtle animation with the text that comes up. This is a great way to bring people and like add this little visual cue that kind of just shift things, and you're presenting your points that way. Why I don't recommend using bullet points is because our brain processes shapes first. What we do is when we're looking at letters, we're scanning, our brain is scanning automatically for shapes. So we're able to tell and read much faster through shapes. And what happens, shapes that are a little familiar for us, our eyes tend to focus a little more on. So with bullet points, because it's a circle, it's a familiar shape, our eyes may actually focus on where we see the bullet point in the presentations and not so much on the text. So if the presenter is showing up talking like this and you just feel like you're slouching, getting a little bored, and you find yourself that you actually want to read their slide deck more, but then you have these bullet points, your eye may actually focus a little more on the bullet point instead of these key points. So using something like this to bring out these key points is a really great way to break up your content and not keep the focus on the messaging. I do want to say that if you do use this, be strategic. Don't have too many points per slide. I would say maybe 3 to 5 are key. That's one of the things that I've learned in my years of working with LinkedIn learning courses, is that too much key points in one slide deck will get overwhelming for people because we don't really tend to remember too much. So keep these simple, keep these animations strategic. Another type of animation that you can do is line draw. This one seems basic, but it's really, really powerful. So let's take a look at how line draw can be applied. Let's say you have a project timeline that you want to present to a client or even just internally. You can apply an animation like this, where you can see these key points come up and this circle is going around each of these icons. That is the line draw animation. And while I did make this timeline transition show up consistently, obviously if you're presenting this, you want to present one section at a time, but I just wanted you to be able to see how that would work all together. Now let's take a look at how that looks inside Keynote. So inside Keynote, here is my slide that I had for that particular project that I was trying to do, the project timeline. And to do this line draw, what you would do is you can go up to the shape panel at the very top, and you can either select one of the existing shapes inside that panel. They have a lot of options. You can also take two shapes, bring them together to create one shape, or you can use their pen tool, which works like the Bezier tool. So if you are familiar with programs like Illustrator, where you can just take a pen tool and draw an object, you can do that inside Keynote as well. It's a little tricky to navigate, but once you get the hang of it, you can actually make really great animations using the line tool and these shapes. But for this purpose, for this example, what I did is I literally just took a circle and then I went onto my right side panel where I can adjust the modifications, and I made it into an outline. So by doing that, then I went onto my right side panel and I went and added a animation. I selected line draw. So I have this outline. And what's really great is that once you select this animation, you can select in the way that this is animated. So with Keynote, you have 3 types of animation definitions. So you have a build-in, you have an action, and a build-out. So for this instance, I wanted it to build in as I pressed, my arrow key so that it would start. And then you can select that. I selected line draw. So once I get into my animate panel, you can see the built-in. I click on that and you have a lot of options inside those. There's so many options that it can get fun to test, but it can also get overwhelming. So when you are going into these animations and looking at all these options, think about how that can affect the way that you tell your story. If it feels like it's too much going on and it becomes distracting, chances are people will stop paying attention to you and they'll start paying attention to your slides, and not necessarily in the sense of, I want to see what the content is. I'm just looking at all the fireworks of movement. So keep that in mind. With this, you can add the duration and how, the direction as well. If you want it to go clockwise, if you want to go counterclockwise, there's so many great options, and you can make it go slower, faster, and you can have it ease in and ease out. There's so many options. You'll see under that, and you may not be able to see it so clearly, but under that there's an option that tells you the order. This is your order of animation. So for this instance, I had several animation points, and this particular circle one with the line draw happened in the 5th order of my animation. And I'll show you what that means. At the bottom of this animate panel, you don't see it here because my screen couldn't capture it all, but there's a button that says build order. When you click on that button, you get when you click on that button, there we go, you get the build order pop-up. This build order is magic because when you start to create more complicated animations like the one that I have here, you start to see that it can get really complicated, really easy, and really confusing. Other platforms to look at your animations or to make an edit, you'd have to go and look for the circle or look for the text, click out, click back in, make the animation, test it, then figure out, oh, I need to change it again, etc., etc. That process is very tedious. What I love about Keynote is that you get build order right there, and it literally shows you the numbers. It tells you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. That's your build order. Those are the ones that show up first, second, and so on and so forth. You'll then see a little preview of what the element is. So if it's an image, you'll see a little visual of the image. If it's text, you see just a little T with an icon there. And it's super helpful. It'll tell you if you do have the text, what the text is. Then you see what type of animation you've selected it. So for instance, I have a move in animation for a lot of them. Then I have it appear. Then for my shape tool with the circle, I have a line draw element to my animation. So this really helps you. And what I love about this particular feature in Keynote is that you can preview all of these inside this build order panel. You don't have to go and click out, preview, go back in, etc., etc. It's all inside one of this little build order magical window that I want to call. And you can see that right here. What happens is that if you have more complicated animations like I have here and all these transitions, you can see that there's a lot there. So this is where this build order panel can be super helpful to really look at all your animations, how everything is working, and save you time. So you can see it can easily add up. When you look at it that way, it looks like the animation is more complex. It isn't, and I'm going to give you some tips on how you can do this in just a few minutes. But this is giving you an idea of the power of Keynote and how you can use this to really help with your brand storytelling capabilities. So we talked about line draw. Now let's talk about slide transitions, which I love slide transitions. So you can do some slide transitions like this. Let's say you want to share some data and you want to kind of give this like swipe feature. This can all be done inside Keynote, and I'm going to share with you how that would look on the back end in just a minute. But you see how you can use these different elements to make your data presentation, to make your story, to make your presentation, your slide deck so much more interesting when you do it strategically. So how would that look like inside Keynote? So you can see here that I have a slide, the one that I was sharing with you. So it looks like there's a lot going on. And the reason being is that how you would achieve this is you'd have to have two elements to start. You'll need a background. So what I did is I designed the background with some people that I knew weren't going to move. So you have like some lamps, the guy in the counter and the woman in the counter, they're over there, kind of like towards the background. So you have your background scene. Then you have another element which would be your illustrations or the image that you want to move on top of this background. So what I did was I created these separate illustrations, and what I love about Keynote is that if you have a vector format or if you're working off of Illustrator, for instance, or even just any image, you can literally drag and drop these inside Keynote. And what happens is that while we don't have the capability to work on vector formats and change the colors inside Keynote just yet, there's ways to do that. But once you import something or you just drag it in, it automatically changes it to a PDF for you. So it retains the high crisp quality. You won't get any pixelation, which is magic to me. So that really helps your workflow. So that's what I did. I had a background, then I went in and just added the elements that I knew I wanted to be able to move across as the PDF or like the vector formats that I imported in here. So I call these my Starbucks people. I wanted them to be able to move across the board. And what I did was I went into my animation panel on the right and I selected action. So I selected the specific people that I wanted to move. And in action, there's a way for you to change the movement, so how it moves across the screen. So inside the screen, you'll see that you'll select your image. When you click on action and you select move, you can select how fast you want that movement to happen, the direction, and you can also define the position. So you'll be able to define it manually, or there's a way for you to do it with like precision inside the side panel. So you'll be able to define your X and your Y axis really easily. And when you're seeing this here in this preview, there's this red line, and that red line is your cue for the movement. So you know that your presentation is going to go from this point to this point when it does that animation. These can get a little tricky when you're working with these, so you almost have to remember the order of how it's going to be able to kind of dissect this. But this is why the preview feature inside the build order is super helpful, because then you can go in and check your information. You kind of see how you've structured everything. Then you have these other types of presentations that are so powerful for you to tell your story. So you can see this type of animation where you can actually click on images, take people to another slide deck. You can use a back button, and this almost creates an experience as if they were on a website. You can do this all inside Keynote. To do this type of animation, it's a little complicated, but essentially you're mixing a slide transition, you're using what's called object move, and you're also just transitioning from one slide to another. And I really explain how you can do this inside my Keynote course. But essentially what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to click on one area, take them to another. And this is really powerful if you're trying to give a presentation to land a new client or to do a proposal and you're bringing your team. This is a great way to make your presentation more interactive and share this with people. And if you do convert this to a PDF, sometimes a lot of these transitions do work. So the animation per se may not translate into a PDF, but the clickable components, where if I made it to where you can click on each image, it'll take you to that specific person on the team. Those things do translate into a PDF document. So if you ever do share these with your clients, that's a great way to retain that interaction inside the PDF. So for that specific one, I do share a lot more details on that in my LinkedIn Learning course, and it's easy to find me. If you find me on Nicte Cuevas on LinkedIn Learning, I'm the only one, so you can't miss me, but you can also go to bit.ly/NCD courses. That's where you see all my courses there, and you'll be able to immediately click on this Keynote course. And I literally take you from the very beginning to the very end, and you get access to my slide decks, to these themes, so that you can use this for yourself or follow along. So it'll literally take you step by step on how you can achieve these particular types of animations. They're super exciting. It's just so hard to share them in one moment or like this presentation. So I wanted to give you the best possible idea of the capabilities and the power of Keynote and how you can use this for your presentations. Now, I want to touch on the best practices for using Apple Keynote before I leave you. And this can actually be something that you can use in any type of presentation software that you decide to use. But when working with Apple Keynote, I highly recommend that you have your content ready before you go into designing your slide deck or trying to figure out how to use Keynote. And the reason being is because of that paralysis analysis, that we get so caught up in trying to make things look aesthetically pleasing, or if we don't feel like we're a designer, we're stuck in that I need to make sure it looks good because my competitors are doing XYZ, and you don't end up focusing on your presentation. You get stuck in the design phase. So I want to make sure that you understand that if you can have your content ready, even if you work with a professional agency, I always tell my clients, let's have the content ready. What's the intention? What's the purpose? How is this going to connect with your brand? How is this going to relate to your audience? And these are the points that then need to be translated into your presentation. Without that, you can just have words without meaning, without purpose, and that can really affect the way that you present and that impression you leave behind. You want to make sure that you make best use of themes and templates and the power behind these and how you can really leverage them to tell your brand story, how you use these to build your brand story, to build that brand recognition. You want to establish content hierarchy. So I didn't talk too much about this, but essentially it's giving readers an experience. So as people look at your slides, think of this as an experience. Every single slide in your slide deck is an experience for your audience. So if you come up showing with so much information, you're going to overwhelm people. And this is what happens where there's a subject matter expert and we're so excited to talk about something. We want to just tell it all in one slide and we want to tell it all in a little tiny frame. And I know we are talking about slides, but this applies to visual communication across the board. So if you're using something for social media, you have this much amount of information, it gets overwhelming. You see how I was so overwhelmed that I got stuck in my own talking. This is what happens through our brains, and sometimes we realize that, sometimes we don't. And when we provide too much information, either our audience's brain shuts off, they get confused, I'm like, this is too much, they get disinterested, and then they just don't pay attention. So if we take some graphic like this that has so much going on and we simplify it a little, we can then have better impact. So there's hierarchy here. So what this does is that you're essentially telling people, here's what I want you to read first, second, and third without necessarily telling them, hey, read this first. So you can tell better stories this way. And the way that you use your text, your copy can really help people read better. With these small icons, you can't tell what they are. It looks like Pac-Man is eating a cherry or Pac-Man is on some roller skates, but it's supposed to be a crib with a little baby. It's so hard to tell when it's such a small size. So this applies across the board for that. Now, bringing it back to how you can establish content hierarchy, remember that it's all about that experience and what you want people to read first and remember. And you always want to consider legibility. Don't go crazy with fonts. This applies so much for, especially anytime you use script fonts or anything, this gets so hard for people to read. Legibility and accessibility also come into play with this because if people are having a hard time reading your content, again, they get distracted, they get disengaged, they lose interest. There goes your brand story. And as always, you want to make sure that you use your animations strategically. Let them help you tell better stories. Let them use as cue points to kind of keep your audience engaged, but don't let that be your fireworks show coming up behind you because you don't want them to steal the show. You want them to support you. Remember, your brand story, how you tell your stories is so powerful. And if you're wanting to get into the world of Keynote to tell your stories, use color, use the experience, leave people with an impact, a memory, and that experience of your brand as you teach them something new. Thank you.
All right. So I'm checking for questions, but in the meantime, while I'm checking for the questions, I have one question for you because we have 1 more minute actually. Are you at all? at all? Now we have company right there for the end of the event.
Yes.
We'll have company.
He wants to He wants to have his own presentation.
By the way, jokes aside, we received a screenshot from somebody, I think in Spain or somewhere there. Their baby was sitting in her mother. She was the attendee, and she tried to communicate with the speakers, but she was not understanding. Her mother wrote on the Instagram story that she was not understanding, that she was muted, but she was so engaged with the conference herself. So just one question on my end. Are you always all about Apple Keynote, or you're still at some point or in some situations going into Google Slides, going into Prezi, going into PowerPoint for Mac? What is the workflow there?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. I think for me, whenever I do apply different softwares, it depends on my client's needs. So if I have a client that is more comfortable with Google Slides, then we'll go into that component and seeing how I can help them with that. Because I don't want to force a client, for instance, to use a specific software if they're not completely comfortable with that. So that's kind of where I align my baseline. I've gotten so comfortable with Keynote, so that tends to be internally what we use with Keynote. But I know with Prezi, you have all these great informations where you can actually make your presentations a little more interactive, where you can have things coming up through the side. So I would say the preface for that, it depends on the experience you want to create and the needs for the clients, where that'll kind of be the defining factor.
This is exactly, I think, what we started with at this event, at this session, and the way I tried to introduce your session in the session before, just to say, hey, these are tools, all of them are incredible and can help you tremendously in your presentations game. It's just, please know what is possible, what each and every one of those platforms is capable of, and then, and only then, based on what you need, decide on the best. Nicte, this was the last session of the conference. Thank you so much for being the last speaker and closing the event. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.